guys, John Sprague here with Onward Property Partners in St. Louis, Missouri, powered by Keller Williams Realty Chesterfield. Excited to talk with you today to really debunk a myth out there that real estate just doesn't change hands the fourth and the first quarter. So the reality is that the fourth and first quarter, they offer the most opportunities for many of the buyers and sellers that are out there. And I want to share a couple concepts with you that can further illustrate this for you. So, the first one that we want to look at is what we call chasing the market, okay? And so what this graph will show is that if this is our price, right, and then this is the time that we're on the market, what will end up happening is if the market perceives the value to be, let's say, at this area, what will end up happening over the course of time, that average fair market value, that maybe appraised value, if you will, of the property, it'll slightly go down, okay? Because what's happening is over the course of time, the market's rejecting this price for whatever reason. But it won't be too dramatic unless we're in a shifted market where we can start seeing it really move. Right now, that is happening in some of our higher price points. In the luxury markets, we're starting to see people go ahead and get really aggressive with their price reductions. And I'll share with you the second concept that's contributing to that, and that's the July slide. So this is what the average fair market value is of the home. Now, what ends up happening is we've got a lot of sellers right now. What they're doing is that they're coming out on the market with misinformation. They're coming out on the market with information of 2017 and beginning of 2018 valuations and the level of optimism that's there. And so they're coming out with property prices that are somewhere around here, right? And so then what's the age-old adage? If the market doesn't respond the way we want it to, what's the wives' tale of when should we address that price? How long into the listing what would you think about?
30 days.
30 days. Okay, 30 days. Now, what's a challenge with that is that in this market, we know that 77% of our activity from the buying community happens in the first 21 days. So if we don't reset or reposition our property within that time frame, we just lost that buying community, right? So the 30 days, the clients, the sellers are still doing that, and then they'll do a price reduction that doesn't make an impact to the buyer pool, right? So if we're at, let's say, a $200,000 price point and we do a price reduction of $2,500, is that really going to motivate a buyer to go ahead and A, view the property now, and B, is it going to compel them to write an offer?
No.
Probably not, right? And so if you think about it, there's two reasons that a buyer is going to go ahead and write an offer today. One, it's the merit of the home and the value that they perceive there to be. And then the second one is that they believe it's not going to be there tomorrow. We haven't done anything in that scenario there to go ahead and compel that buyer to believe that it's not going to be there tomorrow. Therefore, they're likely to hesitate and wait for the market to go ahead and push more pressure on that seller, okay? So what we see happening here is that you see these price reductions that are being done every 30 days, and they're not making an impact in the buying community. So then you see this going on. So now we're 90 days in. What's the conversation that a buyer's having right now that might walk into 123 Main Street?
What's wrong with the property? Or what kind of deal can they get for it?
Yeah, so what's wrong with the property? How come it hasn't sold? And it's human nature. We are wonderful storytellers, right? So we start making up these stories in our minds why it hasn't sold beforehand. So that crack in the foundation that was a minor concern over here becomes to the point where we need 7 structural engineers to look at it to make sure that everybody's okay with it, because we've got this perception that that's why it hasn't sold. In reality, it was just, it wasn't priced appropriately to go ahead and attract an offer. So then what we have going on here, because, see, this is the average fair market value, and this uses pure logic, right? Then what you've got here is that you've got what's called a saleable price. Now this right here, the saleable price, what that is there, that actually includes the buyer's emotion. So brilliant, I was able to spell that in multiple ways. You guys like that? So that's able to go ahead and that includes the buyer's emotion, right? And so what they're doing is they're saying, well, gee, if it's been out here this long, and now they're down here at 200,000, then, they probably need to be somewhere around the 180, but they still are too high. So now let's just use this example for a second. Let's say that the market thinks that we're at 200 here, okay? But then the fair market value is 200. The seller thinks we're at 220, okay? And then the buying community thinks we're at 180 in this scenario. So what happens here is that a lot of times a seller will say, well, just bring me an offer, right? Have you guys ever heard that?
Mm-hmm.
Just bring me an offer. Well, so there's two rules of reason that start to go into play here. So the first one is that most people will consider a fair deal by splitting the uprights or splitting the difference. So if they think that this is, what the home might appraise for, and we really want to get it here, then we're probably going to have to offer 180 just to get to this 200. That's what's going on in the buyer's mind, right? And so now what they're thinking to themselves, if I offer $180,000 for a home that's listed at 220, another rule of reason starts coming in to fight or flight. Now that could be perceived, that's less than a 90% offer, so that could be perceived as an offensive offer. And so most people won't even engage that, and they'll just go on to the next property, right? So what we see happening is that the sellers, if they're misinformed, they end up staying on the market for a significant amount of time and then finally sell down here where they've chased the market, right? So that's one of the areas here. Who would this benefit? This scenario here.
The buyer.
Absolutely, right? So the patient buyer is who this benefits here, right? So now there's something else that's going on here, because this is not an absolute for every transaction that's out there right now. What we've got really a tale of two worlds, a tale of two markets, really, okay? And so the tale of two markets, what's inspiring them is actually what's called the July slide. Okay, so from January to July, we have more transactions that are being sold every month, okay? And this isn't just in St. Louis, but it's across the board. Anything that's not like a vacation area, this is consistent, right? So then you got from July to December is we see fewer transactions, right? So now what happens here is that if you were to go ahead and just do one of these guys, so this is your first quarter, this is your second quarter, this is your third quarter, and this is your fourth quarter, right? And we're over here in we're just entering the fourth quarter in 2018 right now at this recording. So what ends up happening here is that when there's more transactions in the stock market, when a stock is trading at a higher volume, it's perceived to be less volatile, right? Because they've got a lot of transactions that are happening, and so the volatility is limited, right? But now over here, when we've got fewer transactions, the volatility becomes much more pronounced, right? So I'm going to pause for a second here. So what questions or what are some of the ahas or takeaways of the July slide so far? What do you guys see here potentially in the first and fourth quarter versus the second and third? Any ideas?
It appears both are still volatile, but it appears that it seems more stable when there's more transactions.
Yeah, exactly right. So in the second and third quarters, you've got more activity that's happening, and so there's more stability there. Okay. Now in the first and fourth quarter, if we just let's look at it from a seller's perspective. If we're coming out there and we're properly priced and we're well conditioned, we can still get a peak. Just so you guys know, sale price rarely is different. Average sale price is rarely different through the quarters. So that's a myth that most people have, that in the first and fourth quarter, properties sell for less. That's not empirically true, right? So what we've got here is that we've got some sellers that are taking advantage of that. They're coming out of the market, they're staying ahead of it, and they're able to go ahead and sell for a premium. Then what we've also got, we've got other sellers that they're coming out on the market with misinformation and they're overly optimistic and they're slower to make the adjustments, and they see themselves, if they're truly motivated, right? There's a group of individuals that they're going to come out on the market with misinformation and they're not going to go ahead and make the adjustments appropriately, but they really don't want to sell or they really don't need to sell. They come off the market, right? So the market formally rejects them, but there's still some people that they absolutely need to sell, right? They absolutely need to move. In those scenarios, they are the most vulnerable to go ahead and see one of these. An area where we're seeing this, specifically in the St. Louis area, is the Chesterfield Valley area. So we're seeing massive price reductions to attract buyers that as properties are waning on the market and the supply is swelling. So that's creating a phenomenal opportunity for those sellers. Now, this is something here that as a seller has a decision, they can figure out where they want to be at, and that's why it's so important to make sure that we're hitting that price and we're doing it right the first time. With that, I want to leave you guys with see what questions you guys might have, and I hope that you guys reach out with anything, any thoughts, questions, concerns, or excitements you might have regarding these two concepts and how it might apply to you and your real estate goals. Thanks so much, and have a good day.